the fourth largest army on the planet. 1,200,000 soldiers in active service, roughly 40 to 50 nuclear warheads, give or take, depending on who you ask. And a leader who rewrote the constitution in 2025 to formally declare South Korea a hostile state. Not a rival, not a neighbor, but an enemy. North Korea doesn't do things quietly, but here's the thing about numbers. They can lie. 1 million men with rifles from the 1960s is not the same as 1 million men with modern weapons. And the question we're actually asking today isn't whether North Korea looks scary on a spreadsheet. It's whether this country with this army could realistically win a war. Against South Korea, against the United States, or against both at the same time. The answer is complicated, and it depends entirely on which part of the arsenal we're looking at. Let's start at the bottom. North Korea's standard infantry rifle is the Type 88, a reverse-engineered copy of the Soviet AKS-74, locally produced since the late 1980s. It fires the 5.45 39mm round. It's reasonably reliable, and it's been the backbone of KPA infantry for over 3 decades. Nothing revolutionary, but nothing embarrassing either. More interesting is the Type 98, a bullpup design that suggests North Korean engineers were at least paying attention to what the rest of the world was doing. It's shorter, it's lighter, and it shows up in the hands of elite units during military parades. How many are actually in service is genuinely unknown. Machine gun doctrine leans heavily on the PKM and variants, Soviet origin, widely distributed, robust enough to keep working in harsh field conditions. Sniper elements are equipped with the Type 82, a local derivative of the Dragunov SVD, chambered in 7.6205 The small arms picture is, in short, adequate. Not modern, not cutting edge, but functional. The real story starts when you look at what's rolling behind the infantry. The Korean People's Army fields one of the largest armored forces in the world, on paper. The International Institute for Strategic Studies estimated in 2024 that North Korea operates more than 3,500 main battle tanks, 560 light tanks, and 2,500 armored personnel carriers. Those are not small numbers. The workhorse of the fleet is the Pokpung-ho, a derivative of the Soviet T-62, locally modified and updated through at least 5 variants over the decades. It's a tank that would have been competitive in the 1970s. In 2025, it's survivable in low-intensity conflict, but it would be a serious liability against a modern opponent with anti-tank guided missiles and air superiority. The showpiece is the Pokpung-ho. Unveiled in the early 2000s, North Korea's propaganda machine calls it the most powerful tank in the world. That's not accurate. What it actually appears to be is a composite design drawing from Soviet T-72 and T-80 influences, with locally developed composite armor and a 125mm smoothbore gun. Estimates hover between 200 and 300 units in active service. In 2025, Kim Jong-un showcased what state media called the M2020, a newer platform with visible improvements in armor layout and what appeared to be an anti-tank guided missile launcher on the turret. Western analysts are still working out the details. The real problem isn't the hardware, it's logistics. North Korea's fuel situation is severe. UN sanctions have dramatically limited refined petroleum imports. Running a large armored offensive requires enormous quantities of diesel. The KPA has workarounds, fuel reserves, domestic production from coal liquefaction, but sustaining a multi-day armor offensive would burn through those reserves fast. Mountains cover roughly 70% of the north, and the routes into the south funnel through narrow corridors that US and South Korean forces have spent decades preparing to defend. Mass armor on a narrow front is a predictable problem with very prepared solutions. The tanks exist. Moving them where they need to go, keeping them fueled, and keeping them alive against modern anti-tank systems is another matter entirely. If there's one part of the North Korean military that every serious analyst agrees is genuinely terrifying, this is it. North Korea has roughly 20,000 artillery pieces. That figure comes from multiple US government assessments and has been consistent for years. The bulk of this force is positioned within range of the DMZ, and a significant portion of it within range of Seoul, just 55 kilometers from the border. The conventional threat alone is staggering. North Korea's tube artillery includes 170mm self-propelled guns, the Kokwsan, with a range of up to 60 kilometers when firing rocket-assisted rounds. Multiple rocket launch systems include domestically produced variants up to 300mm in caliber. In 2019, Pyongyang unveiled a 600mm super-large MLRS that analysts believe is designed to carry tactical nuclear warheads. Military planners estimate that North Korean artillery could fire 10,000 rounds per hour on Seoul in the opening hours of a war. Even with South Korean counter-battery fire degrading that number rapidly, the civilian casualties in the early stages would be catastrophic. This isn't speculation. It's the central reason why diplomatic engagement with Pyongyang has always involved walking a very careful line. North Korea has been shipping significant quantities of 152mm shells and Grad rockets to Russia since 2023, confirmed by US, South Korean and Ukrainian officials. That's inventory that won't be available in a conflict on the peninsula. Counter-battery radar systems can track incoming rounds and calculate the firing position within seconds. The first wave of North Korean artillery would be devastating. The second wave would be significantly smaller. The window of maximum danger is the opening 24 to 48 hours. After that, the equation starts to shift. The Korean People's Army Air Force has somewhere around 600 combat aircraft. That sounds like a lot. It isn't. Of those 600, the most modern are approximately 35 MiG-29 Fulcrums, Soviet-era fighters that entered service in the 1980s and represent the absolute ceiling of North Korean air power. Concentrated around Pyongyang, they would be competitive in a dogfight, with aircraft from 1990. The rest of the fleet is significantly worse. Around 56 MiG-23s, 120 Chinese-built J-7s, basically a copy of the MiG-21, 26 actual MiG-21s, Su-7 ground attack jets from the 1950s, and a collection of Il-28 jet bombers already considered obsolete when the Beatles were still together. The US Defense Intelligence Agency stated bluntly that the KPF would face considerable difficulty against South Korean air defenses. And that's before American air power enters the picture. There's also the pilot problem. North Korean pilots average around 30 flight hours per year, compared to 180 hours for US Air Force pilots and around 150 for South Korean pilots. That gap doesn't just make someone a worse dogfighter, it makes them dangerous to themselves. Aircraft handling at low flight hours means accidents, spatial disorientation, and poor decision-making under stress. The one area where the KPAF could be effective is the An-2 Colt, a slow, propeller-driven biplane from 1947. Its value isn't in combat, it's in special forces insertion. Flying low, slow, and under radar coverage, these aircraft can deposit soldiers deep behind enemy lines before anyone knows they're there. North Korea is also reportedly set to receive MiG-29s and Su-27s from Russia, flagged by US Indo-Pacific Command in 2024. The air picture is not favorable for the North, not even close. And now we get to the part of this that changes everything. North Korea has conducted 6 nuclear tests. The most recent was September 2017, when Pyongyang claimed to have detonated a thermonuclear weapon, a hydrogen bomb. Independent seismic analysis estimated the yield at somewhere between 100 and 250 kilotons. For context, the bomb dropped on Hiroshima was approximately 15 kilotons. The number of warheads is genuinely uncertain. The Congressional Research Service estimated in 2024 that North Korea has likely produced enough fissile material for up to 90 weapons, with approximately 50 assembled. The US Defense Intelligence Agency assessed in 2025 that North Korea had 10 or fewer operational ICBMs, with a projection of up to 50 by 2035. In 2017, North Korea tested the Hwasong-14 and Hwasong-15, the first missiles assessed as capable of reaching the continental United States. In 2022, it tested the Hwasong-17, 24 to 26 meters long, with an estimated range of 15,000 kilometers. In October 2024, Pyongyang tested the Hwasong-19, a solid-fueled ICBM that can launch with far less preparation time, harder to detect, harder to preempt. North Korea has been selling KN-23 ballistic missiles and 152mm artillery shells to Russia since at least 2023. These are systems that work, fired in combat conditions in Ukraine. They are not museum pieces. The nuclear and missile program is the reason North Korea still exists as a state. Any scenario in which North Korea is genuinely cornered runs directly into the question of what Kim Jong-un would actually do with these weapons. Nobody has a comfortable answer to that. North Korea's special operations forces are, by raw numbers, the largest in the world. Estimates put the total between 80,000 and 200,000 personnel, including light infantry, reconnaissance units, sniper brigades, and what North Korea calls its Storm Corps, trained specifically for infiltration and sabotage operations in South Korea. Their insertion methods range from the mundane to the creative. Tunnels beneath the DMZ, at least 4 have been discovered, with more suspected. Submersibles. The An-2 biplane flying below radar coverage. In a conflict scenario, the doctrine is to get as many of these forces behind South Korean lines as quickly as possible, targeting command centers, airfields, missile defense installations, and civilian infrastructure. The Navy is the weakest link in the entire Korean People's Army. It's a coastal force designed for short-range operations, not power projection. It operates several dozen Romeo-class submarines, Soviet Cold War designs from the 1950s that are noisy, slow, and genuinely difficult to maintain. North Korea's naval power in any confrontation would be primarily in mines and submarine harassment of shipping lanes. The submarine North Korea unveiled in 2023, designated by Western analysts as the hero Kim Kun-ok, is a modified Romeo class converted to carry tactical nuclear-armed cruise missiles. Several analysts have raised serious doubts about whether a 1950s submarine hull can reliably operate these systems. But the intent is clear: a survivable second strike capability at sea. The Special Forces remain the KPA's most credible conventional threat below the nuclear threshold. So, could North Korea actually win a war? In a straight conventional fight against South Korea and the United States, no. The air power gap alone is decisive. US and South Korean F-35s, F-16s, and F-15s would establish air superiority within the first days of conflict. Without air cover, North Korean armored columns become targets. Without fuel, they stop moving. Without resupply, the artillery falls silent. But that framing misses the real question. North Korea was never trying to win a conventional war. It was trying to make a conventional war too expensive to fight. And in that narrower objective, it has largely succeeded. The artillery threat to Seoul alone, 25 million people within range of 20,000 guns, creates a deterrent that no political leader wants to test. Add nuclear weapons and the calculation becomes almost impossible. Kim Jong-un formalized this in 2023 when he updated North Korean nuclear doctrine to include preemptive strikes in scenarios where leadership survival is threatened. That's not empty rhetoric. That's a stated policy. What North Korea has built is not a military capable of winning wars. It's a military capable of making others unwilling to start them. For a regime that has survived every prediction of its collapse for 70 years, it's working.